Pixelated Purgatory. Chapter 1. Transmission. The clock on Jake's monitor blinked 2:37 a.m., its neon green glow casting an eerie pallor over his cramped apartment. Lines of code scrolled endlessly, a digital waterfall blurring into meaningless symbols. He rubbed his eyes, the familiar ache of late-night debugging sessions throbbing behind them. A notification pinged, slicing through his fog. Jake's hand froze over the mouse, sudden unease gripping him. Probably nothing. Another system alert. Another bug. He clicked. The message expanded, filling his screen with static before resolving. "Jake, come home. The game is real." His breath caught. The words pulsed, seeming to float off the screen. Jake blinked hard, but they remained, accusatory in their urgency. Sender, Mike, his brother. Reality stuttered like a faulty video feed. Suddenly Jake was no longer in his apartment, but back in Pixelville, the scent of pine and damp earth overwhelming. He was 10 again, at the edge of Binary Woods. Mike, 14 and gangly, beckoned him forward, eyes dancing with excitement. "Come on, Jake! I found something cool!" Jake hesitated, shadows writhing unnaturally between trees. "I don't know, Mike. Dad said—" "Dad's not here," Mike snapped. "Don't be such a baby." The words stung, propelling Jake forward. Branches snagged his clothes as he followed Mike deeper. The trees closed in, whispering in a language just beyond comprehension. A clearing materialized. At its center stood a moss-covered stone, etched with eye-searing symbols. Mike approached, hand outstretched. "Look, it's like in that game." A sound like reality tearing echoed. Jake's vision blurred, pixelating at the edges. He reached for Mike, but his brother was already fading, merging with the static. Jake gasped, snapping back to his apartment. Heart racing, he stared at the message, its implications coiling around his mind. "The game is real," he muttered, tasting metal. He paced, code spilling from his lips. "If message == true, return to _Pixelville, else stay _safe." Jake forced himself to breathe, to think rationally. Years had passed since he'd spoken to Mike or set foot in Pixelville. The town held nothing but painful memories and questions. Yet the message blinked insistently, a digital pulse demanding attention. He collapsed onto his bed, mind racing. Memories and doubts warred as sleep eluded him, interrupted by dreams of glitching forests and arcane symbols. At dawn, Jake decided. He reached for his phone, booking a one-way ticket to Pixelville before doubt could intervene. As the confirmation arrived, Jake felt he'd initiated an irreversible sequence. Whatever awaited him, whatever game Mike meant, his life would never be the same. He packed, each item another line of code in a program that would save or destroy him. The journey home had begun, a descent into a reality where digital and physical, past and present, blurred beyond recognition. Chapter 2. Homecoming. The road to Pixelville wound through towering evergreens, their branches reaching out like grasping fingers in the twilight. Jake's rental car hummed softly, the only sound breaking the oppressive silence. As he approached the town limits, an inexplicable heaviness settled in his chest. Something was wrong. Terribly, inexplicably wrong. A flicker in his peripheral vision made Jake slam on the brakes. For a split second, the forest had glitched. The trees distorted, their outlines breaking apart into jagged pixels before snapping back to normal. "Debug error," Jake muttered, rubbing his eyes. "Sleep deprivation. Has to be." But as he rolled into Pixelville proper, that explanation crumbled like corrupted data. The town square, once bustling with life, now stood frozen in an eerie tableau. Residents moved in jerky, repetitive patterns, their actions as predictable as NPCs in a poorly coded game. Jake parked and stepped out, his shoes crunching on gravel that sounded off. Too uniform, like a looped sound effect. He approached a familiar figure, Mr. Henderson, the old shopkeeper. "Welcome to Henderson's General Store," the old man chirped, his voice unnaturally chipper. "Can I interest you in our daily special?" "Mr. Henderson." Jake waved a hand in front of the man's face. "It's me, Jake, Mike's brother." The shopkeeper's eyes remained fixed, his smile plastered on like a texture map. "Welcome to Henderson's General Store. Can I interest you in our daily special?" Jake backed away, heart racing. He turned and nearly collided with Sarah Winters, his old high school crush. "Jake!" Sarah's eyes widened with recognition, a flicker of genuine emotion in a sea of automatons. "Oh, thank God, you're here. You're real." "Sarah? What's going on? What's happened to everyone?" Sarah grabbed his arm, fingers digging in with desperate strength. "It's not safe to talk here," she hissed, eyes darting around. "They might hear us." "They? Who's they?" But Sarah was already pulling him along, weaving through the town's unnatural facsimile of daily life. They passed the diner, where patrons sat in a grim parody of a meal, forks endlessly moving from plate to mouth and back again. "It started about a month ago," Sarah whispered as they ducked into an alley. "People just changed, started acting like this. At first it was just a few, but now—" A distant screech cut through the air, like digital feedback given nightmarish form. Sarah paled. "We need to move, now." As they ran, Jake's mind raced, trying to process the impossible scenario unfolding around him. The town he'd grown up in, the place he'd fled from, had become a nightmare of pixelated proportions. "Sarah, I didn't know you were still in town," Jake panted as they paused to catch their breath. "I'm the town librarian now," she replied, her voice tight with fear and exertion. "Or I was before this. The library might be the last safe place left." They rounded a corner, and Jake froze. There, looming at the end of the street, stood the neon Nexus arcade. Its sign flickered with an otherworldly pulse, casting sickly light over the surrounding buildings. "Mike," Jake breathed, memories of childhood trauma bubbling up like glitched textures. "He's in there, isn't he?" Sarah's grip on his arm tightened. "Jake, listen to me. Whatever's happening, it started there. That place. It's not what it seems." As if in response, the arcade's lights flared, momentarily bathing the entire street in a wash of unnatural color. In that instant, reality seemed to waver, the very fabric of the world threatening to tear apart. Jake swallowed hard, fighting back a wave of nausea. He'd come home seeking answers, hoping to reconcile with his brother. Instead, he'd stepped into a waking nightmare, where the laws of reality bent and broke like poorly written code. "What do we do?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. Sarah's eyes, filled with a mixture of fear and determination, met his. "We find a way to end this. We have to. Maybe there's something in the library that can help us understand what's happening." As night fell over Pixelville, the shadows seemed to move with pixelated malevolence. Somewhere in the darkness, a familiar voice called out, distorted and wrong, "Game over, Jake! Game over!" Chapter 3. Nexus. The neon Nexus arcade's sign pulsed erratically, painting the empty town square in sickly hues. Jake stood before it, his shadow dancing with each unstable flicker. A chill ran through him, born not from the cool mist clinging to the ground, but from the palpable wrongness emanating from the building. "Console log. Entering danger zone," he muttered, a coping mechanism that felt laughably inadequate in the face of this surreal horror. The arcade's door swung inward at his touch, too eager. Stale air rushed out, carrying the scent of ozone and something metallic, like old pennies and nosebleeds. Inside, derelict cabinets stood sentinel. Their screens flickered weakly, displaying fragmented images that vanished under scrutiny. Jake's footsteps echoed unnaturally, each sound rippling through the air like a stone in still water. Then he saw it. At the far end, a solitary cabinet pulsed with otherworldly light. Unlike the others, this monolith bore no markings, just brushed metal and smoked glass, humming with barely contained power. Jake approached, heart pounding. The screen flickered to life, displaying a dizzying swirl of code and fractals. He recognized snippets of programming languages, some familiar, others impossible. "What are you?" Jake whispered, fingers hovering over the controls. The screen cleared, revealing a simple prompt: Player 1 start. Jake's hand trembled. Every instinct screamed at him to flee, but a deeper compulsion pulled at him, the need to debug this nightmare reality. "System out. Printlan. God help me," Jake murmured, and pressed start. The world shuddered. Walls seemed to breathe. The screen exploded into light and sound, each pixel a window into impossible realities. Jake's stomach lurched as if the floor had vanished. His vision swam, the boundaries between body and game blurring. For a moment he was everywhere and nowhere, consciousness fragmented across digital synapses. When the vertigo subsided, Jake stood before a transformed arcade. Machines now hummed with twisted life, their screens displaying corrupted classics. The air crackled, and faint whispers echoed, snippets of code and glitched audio. A voice, both distant and intimately close, resonated. "Welcome, Player One. Shall we begin?" Jake gripped the controls, knuckles white with determination and fear. Whatever this was, game, nightmare, or something beyond, he had to see it through. "Run program," Jake said, voice steadier than he felt. The screen shifted, presenting a warped map of Pixelville. Districts pulsed with sickly light, levels waiting to be conquered or corrupted. The Woodlands section glowed with an inviting emerald hue. As Jake's finger hovered over the selection, he knew each move would alter not just pixels, but the fabric of reality outside. With a deep breath, he chose. The world dissolved, reforming into something new and terrifying. Jake braced himself, knowing the challenges ahead would test not just his skills, but his grip on sanity. The game had begun, and Pixelville would never be the same. Chapter 4. Woodlands reality fractured, pixels cascading across Jake's vision. As the digital torrent subsided, he found himself in a forest that defied logic. Trees stretched skyward, their trunks glitching and flickering. Jake's stomach lurched as a massive pine uprooted itself, rising into the air before crashing back down. Upside down, its branches burrowing into the earth while roots clawed at the sky. "What the hell?" Jake muttered, fingers twitching for a non-existent keyboard, muscle memory trying to debug this fractured world. A distant buzzing grew louder, punctuated by shouts and splintering wood. Jake moved towards the commotion, leaves crunching beneath his feet in an oddly melodic 8-bit tone. He emerged into a clearing and froze. A group of lumberjacks, faces eerily familiar yet distorted, swung their axes in perfect unison. But instead of trees, they battled a swarm of floating, pixelated chainsaws that moved with predatory intent. "Bob? Elena?" Jake called out, recognizing warped versions of townspeople he'd known since childhood. They didn't respond, continuing their robotic motions. A saw broke from the swarm, charging straight at Jake. He ducked, feeling the rush of air as it passed overhead. The saw embedded itself in a nearby tree, which shuddered and split into a shower of cubes. "Damn it!" Jake hissed, scrambling behind a glitching boulder. His mind raced, trying to apply logic to this illogical world. If this was a game, there had to be rules, objectives. A flash of light caught his eye. At the edge of the clearing, a translucent axe hovered, emitting a soft glow. Jake lunged for it, his hand closing around the handle just as another saw dive-bombed his position. The axe hummed with energy. Jake swung instinctively, and the saw exploded into a burst of pixels. Exhilaration surged through him, followed immediately by nausea. This was wrong. All of it. As Jake fended off the saws, fragmented memories surfaced. Quantum Frontier's arrival in town, promises of progress, whispers of secret experiments. Each swing of the axe knocked loose another piece of the puzzle. The last saw fell, dissolving into a shower of golden pixels that coalesced into a floating key. Jake hesitated, then grasped it. Reality rippled outward from where he stood. When the distortion cleared, Jake found himself at the edge of town, where the Binary Woods logging camp had once thrived. But the familiar buildings were now twisted parodies, pulsing with an otherworldly glow. Workers moved in jerky, programmed patterns, their actions an unsettling dance between human and machine. Trees phased in and out of existence, while wildlife skittered about in unnaturally precise paths. Jake stared at his hands, still feeling the phantom weight of the axe. He had changed something fundamental in the fabric of reality, and the implications terrified him. "What have I done?" he whispered, watching as the transformed Binary Woods bled its corruption into the town beyond. The line between game and reality was blurring, and Jake realized with growing horror that he was the one erasing it. A distant, distorted laugh echoed through the trees. Mike's laugh, but wrong, twisted. Jake clenched his fists, determination and dread settling in his gut. Whatever this game was, whatever had happened to his brother and his town, he had to push forward. The next level awaited, and with it, Jake hoped, answers. But as he turned towards town, a part of him wondered if he was walking further into the game's clutches with every step he took. Chapter 5. Glitches in the System. Jake stumbled out of the arcade, his head spinning. The world around him had shifted, warped into something both familiar and alien. Main Street pulsed with an eerie, pixelated glow. Buildings flickered in and out of existence, their facades glitching between eras. He blinked hard, but the digital distortion remained. A group of townspeople marched past, their movements jerky and repetitive, eyes vacant, faces frozen in uncanny smiles. "What the hell is happening?" Jake muttered, fingers twitching, muscle memory trying to debug a reality gone haywire. A hand grabbed his shoulder. Jake whirled around, heart racing, face to face with a familiar woman, Sarah, the librarian he'd encountered earlier. Her eyes still sparked with awareness, a stark contrast to the vacant stares around them. "We need to talk," she said, voice low and urgent. "It's not safe out here." Jake nodded, relieved to see a friendly face in this nightmare. "Lead the way." Sarah guided him through winding streets that seemed to rearrange themselves with each turn. They ducked into a small, cluttered bookshop. Unlike the glitching exteriors, this space felt solid, real. "You played the game, didn't you?" Sarah asked, eyes narrowing. Jake nodded, a chill running down his spine. "How did you know?" "Because you're here, and you're still you," she replied. "The game, it's changing everything, rewriting reality. Most people, they're trapped in loops now, like NPCs in some twisted RPG." Jake's mind raced. But how? Why? Sarah sighed, pulling out a dusty folder. It all started with Quantum Frontier. They came to town promising to revitalize the economy, but they were really after something else entirely. She spread out a collection of newspaper clippings, photographs, and internal memos. Jake's eyes widened as he scanned the documents. Quantum Frontier wasn't just any tech company, Sarah explained, pointing to a confidential report. They were pioneers in quantum computing and neural interfaces, but their ambitions went far beyond conventional technology. Jake picked up a memo, its header marked with an ominous Project Reality Rewrite. His blood ran cold as he read. They were developing software capable of altering the fabric of reality itself, he whispered, the implications sinking in. Sarah nodded grimly. At first it was small scale, changing the color of a flower, altering the weather for a few minutes. But then they started pushing the boundaries. She pointed to a series of incident reports, each more disturbing than the last. They began experimenting with larger alterations, rewriting local history, manipulating people's memories, but it got out of control. As Jake pored over the documents, a searing pain lanced through his head. The world flickered, and suddenly he was a child again, standing in front of the old arcade. Mike was there, older and cooler, feeding quarters into a machine Jake couldn't quite see. "Come on, little bro," Mike's voice echoed. "Don't you want to play?" Jake blinked, back in the bookshop, gasping for air. Sarah steadied him, concern etched on her face. "The game," Jake wheezed. "It's not just changing the town, it's feeding off memories, traumas." Sarah nodded. "I've seen it happen to others. The deeper you go, the more it pulls from your mind. Quantum Frontier's experiments opened a Pandora's box we can't close." A distant rumble shook the building. Outside, a section of town transformed before their eyes. Buildings melted into each other, reforming into a grotesque playground of twisted metal and pulsing neon. "It's spreading," Sarah whispered. "Every time someone plays, every level completed, it gets stronger. The game is like a virus, infecting reality itself." Jake's fists clenched, lines of code dancing behind his eyelids. "There has to be a way to stop it, to reset everything." "Maybe," Sarah replied, voice tinged with hope and doubt. "But we need to understand it better, and for that, we need to keep playing," Jake finished, a knot forming in his stomach. A nearby street lamp flickered to life, its beam forming an arrow pointing towards the arcade. Jake and Sarah exchanged a look of grim determination. "Together?" Sarah asked, extending her hand once more. Jake took it, feeling the warmth of human contact grounding him in this unstable reality. Together. As they stepped out, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that each step towards the arcade moved him further from the world he knew. But somewhere in this digital nightmare was the truth about what happened to his brother, to his town, and to the people behind Quantum Frontier's mad experiments. The arcade loomed before them, its neon sign now a twisting, living thing. As they approached, Jake whispered a line of code under his breath, a futile attempt to debug the horrors that awaited them inside. System out, printlan, hello world. But in this world, even the most basic commands could have unforeseen consequences. As the arcade doors swung open of their own accord, Jake realized that this game was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. Chapter 6. Deluge reality shattered, pixels cascading like a digital waterfall. Jake blinked, finding himself knee-deep in murky water. Submerged streets stretched before him, buildings half swallowed by an impossible flood. "What the hell?" he muttered, his voice distorting with an unsettling echo. A memory surfaced, the great flood of '86. He'd been a kid then, watching the river swell, threatening to devour the town. Now that nightmare had twisted into reality. Jake waded forward. The water rippled unnaturally, code fragments bubbling up and bursting with soft pops. In the distance, townspeople moved in jerky, repetitive motions, bailing water from their homes in perfect sync. "Hello?" Jake called out. The NPCs ignored him, continuing their endless, futile task. A splash behind him. Jake whirled around, heart pounding. Nothing. Then movement beneath the surface. Something circled, growing larger, more predatory. "Come on, Jake," he whispered. "It's just part of the game. Not real." His body screamed danger as a monstrous head breached the surface, all gnashing teeth and glowing eyes. Jake's breath caught. He recognized it instantly. The river monster from his childhood nightmares. "No!" Jake gasped. "You're not real!" The creature lunged. Jake dove aside, its jaws snapping inches from his face. He floundered, desperately searching for a weapon. His hand closed around a piece of driftwood. Strange symbols carved its surface. They looked like code. Jake's software engineer brain kicked into gear. If monster attack, then, he muttered, deciphering the glyphs. The beast charged again. Jake thrust the driftwood forward, shouting, "Monster! Attack =, false!" A sound like shattering glass filled the air. The creature froze mid-lunge, glitching violently before dissolving into pixels. Jake stood panting as the flood receded, revealing more of the transformed town. Buildings wavered like mirages, blending Pixelville's history with impossible game-like structures. As the last water vanished, Jake felt a surge of something. Power. Understanding. It was as if a veil had been lifted from his eyes. The world around him seemed to pulse with lines of code, waiting to be read, to be manipulated. "What's happening to me?" Jake whispered, his mind reeling. A voice, soft yet clear, echoed in his head. "Welcome, Player 1. You have unlocked developer mode." Jake's eyes widened as understanding flooded through him. The driftwood, the code. He had inadvertently triggered some hidden mechanism within the game's structure. Tentatively, Jake raised a hand, concentrating on a nearby lamppost. He visualized its code, its properties, and with a thought, watched it flicker and shift at his will. "Oh God," Jake whispered, exhilaration and terror washing over him. He could feel the game's code humming beneath everything. A new sense awakened within him. A distant, distorted laugh echoed. Jake spun, searching, but found only empty, glitching alleyways. "Well played, little coder," a voice whispered from everywhere and nowhere. "But this is just the beginning. Your brother awaits. If you dare to find him." Jake clenched his fists, newfound power coursing through him. "I'm coming, Mike," he promised, voice steady despite his fear. "Whatever it takes, I'll find you." As he stepped forward, ready to face the next nightmarish level, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that with each puzzle solved, each monster defeated, he was losing something of himself to the game. The line between player and played blurred, and somewhere in the digital abyss, Pixelville's true horrors waited to be unleashed. But now, armed with the ability to see and manipulate the code that governed this twisted reality, Jake felt a glimmer of hope. He wasn't just a victim of the game anymore. He was becoming a player in the truest sense. And with these new powers, maybe, just maybe, he stood a chance of saving his brother and unraveling the mysteries of Pixelville. Chapter 7. The Codec Key. The Bitstream archive loomed before Jake and Sarah, its facade flickering between a stately brick building and a wireframe model rendered in glowing green lines. Jake's fingers twitched, an unconscious urge to debug reality itself. "You sure about this?" Sarah asked, her voice tight. Jake nodded, jaw set. "The Pixelville prophecy is our best lead. If the Codec Key exists, it's our chance to rewrite this nightmare." They stepped through the entrance. The world folded in on itself, Jake's stomach lurching as the interior resolved into a vast, impossible space. Bookshelves stretched into infinity, their contents shifting between ancient tomes and pixelated data blocks. "Jake?" Sarah whispered. "Look." Floating screens displayed fragments of Pixelville's history. Jake saw lumber camps, town meetings, and something else. A dark shape lurked at the edges, present in every era. "The digital devourer," Sarah murmured. "It waits in the spaces between, hungering for the moment when reality thins." Jake's hand brushed a shelf. Suddenly he saw the code underlying everything. Data streams flowed through the air, coalescing into objects. He focused, willing the information they needed to materialize. A book appeared in his hands, its pages filled with shifting symbols. "The Codec Key," Jake read aloud. "A mythical object said to have the power to rewrite the town's destiny." Sarah leaned in. "But what is it? Where?" Her words cut off as the air crackled. The screens flickered, and a figure materialized, a glitching amalgamation of familiar faces. "Welcome, players," the Game Master's voice echoed, playful and cold. "Searching for cheat codes, are we?" Jake's fists clenched. "Where's Mike? What have you done with him?" The Game Master's form shifted, briefly taking on Mike's appearance before dissolving into static. "Your brother? Oh, he's part of something greater now. He saw the potential, the power. Why settle for one reality when you can shape them all?" "This isn't a game," Sarah shouted, her voice cracking. "These are people's lives!" A laugh like breaking glass filled the air. "Everything's a game, my dear. Some just have higher stakes." The figure leaned closer, its eyes pools of swirling code. "Your brother understood that. He embraced it. The question is, Jake, will you—" Jake felt something twist inside him, a mixture of fear and an intoxicating sense of potential. He could feel the world's malleability, the power at his fingertips. "No," he growled, pushing the sensation away. "I'm here to end this." The Game Master's smile was a glitch across its face. "End it? Oh, Jake, you've only just begun the final level." With a violent burst of pixels, the figure vanished. The archive trembled, books tumbling as reality reasserted itself. "Jake!" Sarah's voice cut through his daze. She held up a small crystalline object pulsing with energy. I think this is it. The Codec Key." He reached for it, his hand passing through layers of static. As his fingers closed around the key, visions flashed through his mind. Mike, trapped in a prison of code. The town, its history unspooling like corrupted data, and something vast and hungry, waiting in the digital abyss. "We need to go," Jake said, his voice hoarse. "Now." They fled the archive, the key burning in Jake's pocket. As they emerged into Pixelville's twisted landscape, Jake knew they were hurtling towards a confrontation that would determine not just his brother's fate, but the very nature of reality itself. Behind them, the Bitstream archive collapsed into a shower of pixels, erasing itself from existence. Ahead, the town pulsed with malevolent energy, the final level of a game Jake was determined to beat, no matter the cost. Chapter 8. Incident. The world pixelated and reformed, transforming into a distorted version of Quantum Frontier's campus. Glitching neon signs flickered overhead, casting an eerie glow on corrupted data landscapes. Binary code rained from a sky that occasionally tore open, revealing scrolling error messages. Jake muttered, "Console log, level 8, incident," steadying himself. He took a cautious step forward, the ground rippling like disturbed water. Each footfall sent waves of distortion across the terrain, leaving fragmented pixel trails. A holographic guide materialized, its form shifting between various Quantum Frontier employees. Its voice crackled with static. "Welcome to Quantum Frontier, where we're reshaping reality one bit at a time. Please proceed to R&D for your orientation." Jake's eyes narrowed. "Show me the truth," he commanded, focusing his reality-altering abilities on the guide. The hologram glitched violently, its cheerful demeanor replaced by a sinister grin. "Error. Truth. XE not found. Proceed at your own risk, player." It vanished in a shower of pixels. Jake pressed on, navigating corridors that defied geometry. Walls pulsed with code, occasionally parting to reveal hidden rooms and secret labs. He encountered increasingly aggressive security measures. Firewalls manifested as actual walls of flame, forcing him to code makeshift patches. Rogue AI constructs, grotesquely distorted scientists, impeded his progress. "System breach detected," one screeched, its face a jumble of misaligned pixels. "Initiating countermeasures." Jake dodged weaponized data packets, typing mid-air to generate code shields. The rush of power was intoxicating. For a moment he understood the allure that had consumed his brother. Pushing the thought aside, he searched for Quantum Frontier's core. Each room revealed fragments of the company's history. Corrupted emails, glitched footage, fragmented reports. In a cavernous server room, Jake found himself surrounded by data monoliths. The central terminal displayed information about the RealityCraft engine. "Project RealityCraft," Jake read aloud. "Objective: seamless integration of virtual and physical realities for enhanced user experience and control." The implications chilled him. He dug deeper, unraveling layers of encryption. With each revelation, the room warped, reflecting the horrifying truth. Alarms blared, the room destabilized. "Critical data breach," an automated voice announced. "Initiating emergency protocol. All personnel, evacuate immediately." The world began to disintegrate. In the chaos, Jake spotted files detailing the creation of the arcade cabinet holding the town hostage. As he reached for the data, a familiar voice cut through. "Well done, little brother. You've made it to the end of this level." Mike's digitized form appeared, flickering and unstable. "But do you understand what you've uncovered? The power this technology holds?" "Mike, this has to stop," Jake pleaded. "Look at what it's done to the town, to you." Mike's image glitched, his expression cycling between anguish and manic glee. "It's too late, Jake. We're part of the game now, part of something bigger." The level began its final breakdown. Jake's last glimpse was Mike's distorted face, mouthing words lost in the roar of disintegrating data. Jake slammed back into his body, standing before the arcade cabinet in the neon Nexus. He gasped, mind reeling from the revelations. Sarah steadied him as he swayed. "Jake, what happened? What did you see?" He turned to her, eyes wide. "I know how it started," he whispered, "and I think I know how to end it." The arcade's neon lights flickered ominously. Jake saw lines of code dancing across Sarah's worried face. The boundary between game and reality was thinning. "We're running out of time," he said, straightening. "The next level, it's going to change everything." The arcade cabinet emitted a low, pulsing hum. The game waited, ready to push Jake to his limits. He prepared himself for the next phase of this digital nightmare, knowing the fate of Pixelville and his brother hung in the balance. Chapter 9. Threshold. The sky above Pixelville split open, unveiling a torrent of scrolling code that rained down in pixelated droplets. Jake stood in the town square, hand outstretched, as reality bent to his will. A flickering street lamp straightened, its sickly green light stabilizing to a warm yellow. A nearby bench, once a jumble of polygons, smoothed into proper form. "It's intoxicating," Jake murmured, fingers twitching with newfound power. The town's digital pulse sang to him like a siren's call. Sarah's touch on his shoulder snapped him back. "Jake, focus," she urged, her voice taut with worry. "The town's falling apart." She was right. Beyond Jake's small bubble of normalcy, chaos reigned. Buildings phased in and out, their architecture a dizzying blend of eras. Glitching townsfolk repeated their lines with increasing desperation. "I know," Jake replied, shaking off the power's allure. "It's just, I've never felt anything like this." Sarah's eyes softened. "It's the game, Jake. It's designed to be addictive. We can't lose sight of what matters." A booming, distorted voice answered her. "Final level approaching, Player 1," the game master announced, its tone mixing anticipation and malice. "Are you prepared to face your ultimate challenge?" Jake clenched his fists, feeling the town's fate on his shoulders. "What's the plan?" he asked, steadier than he felt. "We need to process your trauma," Sarah replied, her librarian instincts kicking in. "The game feeds on it. Confronting those memories might give you an edge in the final level." Jake nodded, swallowing hard. "Where do we start?" Sarah led him to the Bitstream archive, its facade now a nightmarish blend of books and circuits. Inside, shelves pulsed with eerie light, each book a window to Jake's past. "Choose one," Sarah instructed gently. Jake's trembling hand grasped a thin volume, its cover showing a crude, pixelated treehouse. As he opened it, the world shimmered and changed. They stood in a forest clearing, a rickety treehouse looming above. Young Jake and Mike climbed the ladder, their laughter echoing. "I remember this," Jake whispered, voice thick. "The summer before everything changed." The scene darkened. Rain lashed the treehouse, laughter turning to screams. Lightning struck and flames erupted. Jake watched, paralyzed, as his younger self leapt from the inferno. Mike remained trapped, his cries mixing with the storm's fury. "You couldn't have known," Sarah said softly, touching Jake's arm. "You were just a child." Jake closed his eyes, tears streaming. "I left him. I ran for help, but I left him up there." "And he survived," Sarah reminded him. "You both did. It wasn't your fault, Jake." As Jake processed her words, the scene stabilized. The fire dimmed, rain slowed. Young Mike appeared at the tree's base, shaken but alive, embracing his brother. I never let myself remember it that way," Jake admitted hoarsely. "I always focused on leaving, not on him being okay." The world shimmered, returning them to the archive. The book crumbled to dust, its power spent. "That's how the game works," Sarah explained. "It amplifies our worst memories and deepest fears. But confronting them, remembering the whole truth, takes away its power." Jake nodded, feeling drained yet lighter. "Thank you, Sarah. I couldn't have done this alone." Before she could respond, the ground shuddered violently. Books flew from shelves, pages fluttering like frenzied birds. The game master's voice boomed, shaking dust from the rafters. "Foolish players," it growled, no longer playful but enraged. "You think your petty revelations can stop me? Prepare for your final challenge. Pixelville's fate hangs in the balance." The archive walls melted away, revealing a swirling vortex of code and light. At its center, a doorway pulsed with ominous energy. Jake turned to Sarah, jaw set with determination. "This is it, the final level." Sarah gripped his hand tightly. "Remember what you've learned, Jake. Don't let the game control you. You're stronger than it knows." With a deep breath, Jake stepped towards the doorway. His brother's fate, the town's and perhaps reality itself, rested on what lay beyond. As he crossed the threshold, the world exploded into a dizzying array of pixels and possibilities. The endgame had begun. Chapter 10, Level 10, Endgame. Jake stepped into the void, his body dissolving into pixels before reforming in a twisted landscape. The final level was a nightmarish collage of Pixelville's history and Jake's fractured psyche. Binary trees pulsed with neon veins, their leaves scrolling code. The ground alternated between childhood photos and glitching pavement. A towering structure loomed, a monstrous hybrid of the old arcade and their childhood home, windows flickering with scenes from the past. "Welcome, player!" The Game Master's voice reverberated, distorted through digital static. "Are you prepared for your final test?" Jake clenched his fists, feeling the energy of his newfound powers. "Where's Mike?" he demanded. A chilling laugh echoed as the world shifted. Jake found himself in a corrupted version of their old bedroom. Action figures animated jerkily, acting out violent battles. "Your brother?" the Game Master taunted. "Or what's left of him?" A figure materialized. Mike, but not as Jake remembered him. His form fluctuated between adult and child, an unstable mesh of polygons and glitches. "Hey, little brother," Mike's voice crackled, eyes flashing code. "Took you long enough to reach the final boss? Mike, what happened to you?" Mike's laugh was hollow, glitching. "I embraced it, Jake. The power, the control, it's intoxicating. I am the game now, And the game is me. The room warped, walls melting away to reveal digital chaos. Fragmented memories floated by, their father's angry shouts, Jake leaving town, Mike's descent into obsession. "You don't have to do this," Jake pleaded, dodging pixelated projectiles. "We can fix this. Get you out." "Fix this?" Mike snarled, growing larger, monstrous. "Why would I want that? I control everything here. I can reshape reality." Mike gestured, turning the ground into a rushing river of data. Jake stumbled, nearly swept away by zeros and ones. "Join me, Jake," Mike boomed, voice layered with the Game Master's cold tones. "Take your place as my player too. We can rule this reality and expand beyond. The whole world could be our game." Jake felt the pull of unlimited power. For a moment, he saw the possibility, a world reshaped by their will, free from past pain. But he remembered Sarah's words, their genuine connection amidst chaos. He thought of the townspeople, trapped in endless loops. "No," Jake said firmly. "This isn't right, Mike. It's not real power. It's addiction, escapism. We need to end this." Mike's avatar contorted in rage. "Then you'll die with this pathetic reality." The battle erupted into a frenzy of corrupted memories and digital attacks. Jake dodged pixel fire and leapt glitching chasms, trying to reach the pulsing core within Mike's monstrous form. As Jake fought, he realized the key to unraveling the game's hold lay in confronting their shared trauma. With each memory he faced, the digital realm faltered. "Remember who you are, Mike!" Jake shouted, raw with emotion. "Remember who we were!" Jake projected images of their past building forts, sharing comics, protecting each other. Each genuine memory caused the digital landscape to flicker and destabilize. "This game feeds on our pain, our desire to escape," Jake called out. "But it's not real healing. We have to face our past to move forward." Mike's avatar flickered, anguish crossing his face. "It hurts too much, Jake. I can't." "I know it hurts," Jake said, tears streaming. "But we'll face it together. That's what we should have done all along." Jake reached out, not to attack, but to embrace the digital manifestation of his brother. As they connected, a surge of genuine emotion rippled through the code. The game's structure began to crumble, unable to process real human complexity. Pixels scattered, revealing glimpses of the true Pixelville beneath. "I'm sorry," Jake whispered, holding tight to Mike's flickering form. "For leaving, for not understanding. But I'm here now." A blinding flash erupted as the brothers' reconciliation overloaded the game's systems. Jake felt a sensation of falling, then silence. Jake opened his eyes in the arcade, hand on the unmarked cabinet's joystick. The screen flickered and died. Around him, confused murmurs of awakening townspeople filled the air. As normalcy seeped back into Pixelville, Jake searched for any sign of his brother. But Mike was gone, his fate uncertain in the digital realm's collapse. Jake stumbled out of the arcade, disoriented by the sudden shift back to reality. The town looked normal, but a lingering sense of wrongness permeated the air. Shadows seemed too sharp, colors slightly off. As he walked through the recovering town, Jake noticed subtle glitches, a bird frozen mid-flight, a tree that shimmered like a hologram. The game's influence hadn't fully dissipated. At the edge of town, Jake found the Quantum Frontier facility. The imposing building stood silent, its windows dark. But as Jake approached, he swore he saw lines of code scrolling across the glass. A figure emerged from the shadows. Dr. Eliza Chen, lead researcher at Quantum Frontier. Her smile was cold, calculating. "Impressive work, Jake," she said, her voice unnaturally smooth. "You've exceeded our expectations." "What are you talking about?" Jake demanded. "What have you done?" Dr. Chen's eyes glinted with an inhuman light. "The reality craft engine was just the beginning. You've proven its potential, and your own." Jake's blood ran cold as realization dawned. This was all a test. "A successful one," Dr. Chen nodded. "But don't worry, we're far from finished with Pixelville. Or you." Before Jake could react, Dr. Chen's form flickered and vanished. The Quantum Frontier building shimmered like a mirage, then solidified, looking as abandoned as before. Jake stood alone, the weight of uncertainty crushing down on him. He'd thought he'd won, but now he realized the game might never truly be over. As night fell, Jake walked back into town. The arcade's blank screen seemed to wink at him, a final ambiguous message from a brother lost to code, or perhaps a reminder that some forces couldn't be so easily defeated. Pixelville slept, its residents oblivious to the invisible threads of code that still wove through their reality. And somewhere in the digital ether, the Game Master waited, ready to begin the next level.